So the other day we were talking over dinner about how to make some quick, tasty meals that didn't have a lot of cost with them, either in lots of seasonings and spices, or having a lot of extra things you had to buy to make them. After all the years Mom and I have been together, we've accumulated spices and stuff, so it's easy for us to just talk about, throw a little of this and a little of that in there, and you have this great dish. Granted, great is kind of a perspective thing. A lot of the stuff I like to eat and make and the flavors I like aren't necessarily the favorites of you or your brother or anyone else. But Mom and I have a pretty good handle on what we like. And there's some quick things you can do that will help make some pretty cheap and boring and normally not real tasty meals taste pretty good. And I thought instead of just telling you about it over dinner, I'd actually create a little video you could look at and go back and reference and go to the store and such and get some of your own. So first thing that I should probably comment on is you have to remember that I'm not someone whose health is one that's held up for other people to follow. So a lot of my stuff and a lot of things we're doing is based on me having healthy meals that are good for me. They're also good for your mom, because the stuff I need is general basic USDA guidelines for diet, or FDA guidelines for diet. So lots of stuff without salt, and using different types of oils instead of butters and fats. But in the end, it all kind of comes out the same. It's a good tasting meal. But before we talk about actually cooking, I want to talk to you about being able to buy spice mixes. And this is just one brand we use called Mrs. Dash. It's salt-free. I'll bring these over for you close to see. But they're basically pre-made mixes that you can just sprinkle on real quick. So in this case, we've got Italian, and we've got Chipotle, and we've got a basic herb kind of thing. Real easy. You throw them in the dish when you're cooking, and out comes some good stuff. So I'll be making dinner here in a little bit, and I'll show you how I use those to flavor rice and flavor meat, and to make a nice little meal for Mom. And then we'll talk a little bit about some oils in there at the same time. Alright? Okay, so the first thing I want to make is rice for tonight. We're going to have some chicken, some flavored rice. Now you could go out and buy a rice package for about $1.50 or so, maybe $2. I can't remember what they cost anymore because we don't buy them. The first thing is use a rice maker. I know it sounds kind of opposite to go buy a special tool for something, but it does pay off because you don't have wasted rice. So tonight I'm going to make a garlic and herb rice to go with some garlic and herb chicken and a salad. So it's not complicated. Your rice maker is pretty simple stuff. Grab your garlic and herb seasoning. It doesn't have to be this one, but any of the ones that you pick up. I think McCormick makes some. You need your measuring spoon, and you want the tablespoon. It's the big one. Sounds like a lot, but it's not when you think about how much flavorings in those noodles and rice packs you buy. Dump a tablespoon of that stuff, a little bit more maybe, right in there on the bottom. So all you've done is add the seasoning to the bottom of the rice maker. Next, you add some rice. I like my rice a little dry. Take 1 cup of rice, and then I add about 1.5 cups of water. Now, the thing with rice is that it doesn't matter whether you use a dry measure or wet measure. It's the actual volume. A 1-to-1 volume of rice to water is what you want minimum. Rice like that you want to use for frying or something else that's going to be give some more hydration to the rice, otherwise it'll be really hard. And if you're going to make something sticky like sweet rice, you want to go higher. So I've put that in there. That's it. I turn my Rice maker on. I cover it and let it sit till it goes off. And that's how you make seasoned rice. So now the rice is all cooked up. The last step to do here is just fluff it up and stir everything up. You can see it kind of mixed up a little bit on its own, so just take the lid off, take a fork. Be careful not to gouge your non-stick surface on your rice maker, and just stir that all up. Now, if you want to be a bit healthier about it, you can add some peas and corn and some carrots and stuff to it. We're not going to do that today because we're going to have a big salad with this. This is more just a side to that. Okay, so the rice is done. Okay, it's a little bit later in the day and I'm going to start the chicken now. I'm using some frozen chicken breasts that we got in a bag. I probably wouldn't suggest you do that. It's a bit more expensive, about $5 a pound compared to just buying regular old chicken breasts at about $2 to $3 a pound. You can find it on sale all the time. You can use any meat. And while this is frozen, and I kind of prefer to use it frozen, not frozen is just as good. So there's the chicken. Knife, you want to get a peel it out. And I'm using the big one here because I'm going to throw some stuff in a little bit later that I'm not going to have on the video here for you. Use some olive oil or some peanut oil. Unflavored. I have some flavored oil we could use, but we want to use that seasoning salt. I'm going to put a little bit of oil in here, a little bit more than a tablespoon, because the seasoning will suck up a bunch of it. Okay, so put that on, and then I'm putting the burner on about 5.5, 6. So if 7 is high, I'm about 3/4 of the way to high. Now while that's heating up, I'm going to go ahead and cut up my chicken, some pieces. I just noticed some water in the pan. Oil and water do not mix. You've heard that. And if you let the water sit in there, when the oil gets hot, it'll burst all over. So cut your chicken up in the size pieces you want. Use a good sharp knife. You can cut the frozen chicken. All your knives should be sharp. It's actually safer to use a sharp knife than a dull knife. A dull knife, you'll have a tendency to try to push too hard, and that will result in cuts. And a cut from a sharp knife actually heals better. As you can see, this knife is a good knife. It's one of the ones, Ashley, you actually got me for Christmas one year. You got me 2 of them, a big one and a small one. I like the big one for doing this kind of work. As you can see, a little bit of pressure cuts it right through. Gets it all cut up nice and good there. Okay. Now, one of the things that you may want to think about getting someday is, like I've got here, oops, rinse that off, is some color-coded cutting boards. Now, the thing with the color-coded cutting boards, you're going to see a little bit later here, I'm going to chop some onions and put some mushrooms on this, which, because I'm going to be cooking the mushrooms and the onions, I can use the same cutting board for it. But if I was going to be cutting those up to put them in a salad raw, then I'd run a risk of getting some bacteria on them from the chicken, and that would be really bad. And that's how people get salmonella and get sick and all kinds of other stuff. So the color-coded cutting boards, you don't need the big fancy ones like Mom and I have. Down at the grocery store you'll find real thin ones that are flexible. They run, maybe $7-8 for a set. They're nice and flexible, so they're easy to cut stuff on, and you bend them up and you can dump them into your pan. Makes things a little better that way. But they're a good thing to have around. Your mom got me these really nice ones. They were on sale while she was working one day, and they were on clearance, and so she picked them up for me. And I really like them a lot. So there's my chicken. While we're still waiting for the oil to heat up, I'm going to grab an onion. Now, one of the things about cooking that everybody really wants to remember most of the time is that most of cooking is preparation. The actual cooking part of cooking doesn't take very long. Just a couple minutes generally, unless you're making something like cake or cookies that have a whole lot of time spent. But with the kind of cooking we're talking about here, you're going to spend more time doing things like cutting chicken and onions than you're ever going to spend actually making time in the frying pan here. You'll see that in a second. So my oil's getting hot. And I'm peeling my onion. Now you see how I'm peeling this onion here. Cut it in half down the central. Peel it the back layer off by cutting the bottom of the core off, and then take a little piece off the top and get that little chunk out of there. Now because we're eating these as a side, we want long thin pieces like that. So we're just cutting the edges off right here. I don't know if you can see that very well, but there it is. I'll do this next one with a little more thought about that. So I've cut the onion. Now this is a quarter of an onion. You cut the core piece off here, okay, at an angle. Cut the core off at an angle like that. Don't cut all the way through. That'll leave you one piece at the end. You can peel the whole skin and a little bit of onion off. You have this piece left you got to cut off, so you just slice through from here as well. Again, these are going like peppers and onions. So we're just going to come through, slice them off in wedges like that. Okay, so there's that. Now this onion is extra. I wasn't planning on talking too much about it, but that's an easy way to cut an onion. So back over here, you can see we've got the oils nice and hot in the pan. You can tell as it gets those little spider legs to it. I call them spider legs. It's probably a real name for it. Now we're going to take the same seasoning we used for the rice, because we want to have a consistent flavor here. You could use any of the other ones, but this is the one we're going to use today. And you're going to add another tablespoon. Now remember, this stuff isn't ridiculously expensive. It's only a couple bucks for this whole thing. And with 3 of them, you get a couple of meals out. I think I've had this one almost a month. And I'm just now going through it, and we eat this kind of stuff almost every night. Put the top back on after you pour that out, because you're going to need to shake a little bit more on. Now here's the one spot that gets tricky. Because that oil is nice and hot, I'd suggest you turn it down a little bit. You see it's starting to smoke there. You turn it down a little bit. And now what you want to do is you want to put your seasoning in there, and then your chicken real quick, because you don't want the seasoning to burn. So we're going to shake this in there and see how it's all sizzling up. It's all sizzling. Now we're going to throw this chicken in here. Remember, this chicken is still frozen, so it's full of water. Right? Now you kind of want that burning of the seasoning, because the burning seasoning actually increases the flavor of it a little bit. Okay? Now the problem we got here is all this stuff's going to be burnt on one side. So we need to come along and add a little bit more to the top side, so that as we cook our meat through, a little bit more sinks down. So we're really using about 1.5 tablespoons. You can see there's some burnt seasoning on the bottom of that one. And I have a tendency to use my knife to scrape stuff up and make sure it all floats around when it doesn't shake nice like that. Okay? And now you're just going to let it sit there, and it's just going to sit and cook. Now I try to leave everything on one side like this until I start to see the cooked stuff showing up through. And we'll show a few pieces like that here in a second once it starts to happen. Here's one you already see where it's kind of cooked all the way through a little bit. Nice and hot. So just leave that right on the skillet. Keep that at about a little more than 2/3 of the way up. So remember, the thing goes to 7. I started it off on 6. I moved it down to about 5. And you just let it cook. And you can see right here, this piece is already cooked almost all the way through. Although it's not cooked real and charred on the one side, it's still cooked. Same here with these guys. So we just want to let these keep going. We've got some thicker pieces to cook through. And then turn the heat up just a little bit. That way, when we go to flip them back over, they'll sear a little bit in there. But like I was saying, there's all kinds of different flavors you can have with these things. All right? So that's it. Once your meat's cooked through, If it's a big thick steak, you know, you don't want to cook it too much. Nobody likes overdone steak. But if you throw some of the mesquite barbecue flavor on a nice piece of steak, maybe, you know, I don't know if you'd ever want to go out and buy a porterhouse or a T-bones. They're expensive. But if you get say a eye round steak, you can get those pretty inexpensive. And you just you do the same thing. Put a little oil in the pan, put some seasoning on, put the steak in, season the top side, let it cook for enough to just char up a little bit, flip it over, char it again. Probably about 1.5 to 2 minutes aside. It should come out real nice and tender and very tasty for you. Add a nice side of rice, maybe a little salad, and that's how you do it. Okay, I'm starting to flip some of these over, and I wanted to see what I meant about it burning a little bit. You can see the pan's kind of stuck in. It's kind of stuck on the pan, and you see how it's kind of black here on some of these. That's actually not bad. That's mostly the spices that are charred up, and the only time that that's really bad is if you're using, say, fresh garlic, because it gets real bitter. But in general, you know, it's not a big deal. If it starts smelling like stuff's burning real bad, well, yeah, that's a big deal. But these don't smell burned. They actually smell just flavorful. So I'm not too worried about that. But here, got almost the last one turned over. 2 more. 1 and 2. And that we're just going to serve with some onions and mushrooms. I'm going to throw the onions in here in just a second and back some mushrooms in with some rice on the side and a salad. And it's a nice, easy, healthy dinner. In the time that the cameras were off, I actually did laundry. You've seen me do all the work for this. Obviously, if you bought chicken fresh, you'd have to cut it up and bag some of it and stuff like that if you bought more than just pieces you needed for the night. Okay? You know what? I'm going to go ahead and do the onions here with you on the camera as well, just so you see how I do it. Throw the onions right in there. Notice I didn't do anything but toss the onions in. Mom and I eat a lot of onions and mushrooms because it reduces the amount of meat we need to still enjoy the meal. I know you don't like onions or mushrooms, but when they're done like this, these big Vidalia onions that I buy, they get real sweet. So they're not bitter and they're not nasty. And in these big chunks, they taste very meaty. Now when you're doing onions and mushrooms, you need to leave the onions in there a bit longer than the mushrooms. The mushrooms will burn quicker. And you want to turn your heat down to just under halfway, otherwise your onions will burn real quick and they'll get all bitter on you, and that's bad. So we're going to cook these onions for a little bit, like this. Now, I would tell you, this would be a good time to add a little bit of salt to the pan. But I don't do that for me. Like I said, it's about the blood pressure for us. But if you add a little salt in there, it'll cook them a little quicker. Now, if you notice down here in the pan, it's a little bit dry. And while you generally want to avoid doing this, sometimes you actually have to come along and add a little bit more oil. When you do that, try to get it over more of the pan so it soaks evenly in. Okay? And you don't have to worry about getting too much oil in there because the mushrooms will suck a bunch up and that'll help them cook down. You notice I'm using the back of the knife. If you use a knife or a spatula, always use the back. You know, scrape the bottom so there's a lot of flavor in there, like that. Okay? Just pulling that up off the bottom, and it'll stick to your knife, and that's good. You just want to wipe that off because that stuff will eventually burn and be not good tasting. So if it sticks to the knife, that's okay. Scrape it off the knife. Don't scrape it off your chicken. Okay, so you see I've got that there. Here's the thing I've been using to clean the knife off a few times already. And there you go. Okay, let that sit and cook. While that's cooking now, we can start getting our mushrooms ready. Plain old boring white mushrooms. Again, you don't need these, but Mom and I are sharing this dinner and we want to have some leftovers for lunches the next couple days. For the few pennies extra it cost you, and by few pennies I mean 0, go ahead and buy the ones that are already sliced and washed. I looked at 2 stores And in both stores, it was the same cost to get uncut, unwashed mushrooms as it was to get ones that are already sliced like that. So don't waste your time cleaning them. It's just more prep work you don't want to do. So don't do it. Just buy it. Okay, so our onions are still cooking kind of slow here because we've got the extra chicken in there. That's okay. Shake them up. Let things move around a little bit. And when you get onions stacked up like that one, sometimes it's a good idea just to put them in there. Try to get them down to the heat. When you have all your chicken lined up in one spot, it doesn't really help anything. So kind of stir everything over. Get the onions down into the heat. They're the ones that need to be cooking. Your chicken's already done. Okay. Now, cooking the chicken this way, it will be dry. That's okay. It's white meat. It's supposed to be dry. Why everybody likes white meat, I don't know. I don't like my chicken dry. That's what happens with breast meat. There are ways to cook it so it's not quite as dry, but it takes too much time. And this is taking a lot longer than I told you it would because I'm adding the onions. So now the onions, you can see some of them are starting to get a little softer, and that's a good sign. And it's probably hard to see on the camera. Like here's one, you can see it's soft, it bends easily. It's a big thick piece of onion. Okay, so that means we're getting close to those guys being cooked. One of the other things you got to remember about cooking, you don't want things to be done before you add the next ingredient. Otherwise, everything's overdone. The exception that's the chicken. You want the chicken done because you want to kill anything that's grown in that stuff. So before the onions are done, throw your mushrooms in. Same rule applies. Give a little stir, let things settle out, and now you cover it. The reason you're covering it is you got enough stuff in there. You want to keep that heat in to cook everything evenly. There we go. So one of the little things you can do to make your life easier while you're waiting for the pot to boil, in this case your onions to cook, start cleaning up some of your mess. See, here's an example of an onion that's done right there. It's still firm, but it's nice and translucent. Now, some of these big chunks will never get that way, and that's why I cut them like that, because you want that texture in there. You don't want anything soggy and nasty. You want a little crunch. So do that like that. And let that cook some more. This is my kitchen. Get out. So what I'm really looking at here, I'm no longer looking at the onions, I'm looking at the mushrooms. You look at some of these big pieces of mushroom and they're really hard, and that's okay, but you really don't want that. You want them to be soft like this one, where you touch them and they kind of give a whole bunch. Mushrooms are cheap. They fill you up good. They don't really upset your stomach too much unless you use bad kind. They come in all kinds of flavors. These are just white mushrooms, called buttons by a lot of folks. The portobello mushrooms have a much different flavor to them and are really nice too. We use those a lot. These were on sale this week. if you only have one burner, like a hot plate, you can make the rice in a pot. You can make it early. It's a little more difficult to make than using the rice cooker. And then you can make this. I would really say a rice cooker is the way to go, only because it's a no-brainer. It's really hard to screw up rice in a rice cooker. That said, I've done it quite a number of times. One more thing I want to mention. Mom and I eat at home, so much. Yeah, we eat out a lot, you know that. But I do so much of the cooking. You're not going to get this stuff right the first 3 or 4 times you make it. You'll get too much spice, not enough spice, or the wrong balance of water in the rice. Too much oil in the pan. Those kind of things happen. That's experience. You look at this and you see it's coming out right. I got a little bit of sauce in there that I wanted. I didn't even mention that I wanted the sauce. It helps make the flavor with the rice better. But you're going to mess this up once or twice, only because you have to learn how to do it. It's just like anything else. You didn't go to school, knowing how to do all the stuff you want to do for your job and for your degree. But you learned it all. This is the same thing. I don't know if you can tell, I'm clearly very nervous about doing this first video for you. I'm talking way too much and probably way too fast. But I'm sure it'll all come out better in editing than it is right now in my head. So while we're waiting for this to finish up, before I plate it up and show you what you got here, let's go back through the recipes again. So over here, sitting on the side still is our rice. Our rice was 1 tablespoon of seasoning, 1 cup of rice, 1.5 cups of water. It comes out with kind of an al dente. It's got some pressure to it when you try to bite it, but it's not crunchy, and that's how you want that. You can add, with a cup of rice and a cup of water, you can add up to a cup of peas and up to a cup of corn, both, for 2 cups of vegetables. If you use broccoli or something else, cut it up so it's kind of small, and you can add about a 1/2 cup. I typically go with a cup of peas and a cup of corn, just so it adds more. With this particular seasoning though, the garlic and herb, I would only use peas, I wouldn't use corn. And throw some shredded carrots in there to give it a little more texture. So that's pretty good. But it was a tablespoon of seasoning, a cup of rice, and a 1.5 cups of water. Over here, looks like our chicken is done and our everything else is done. You see our onions have started to get nice and clear. Our mushrooms are nice and tender, so we're going to turn off the heat. Okay, it's about 1.5 tablespoons, maybe really 2 tablespoons of oil, a tablespoon of your seasoning, 1 chicken breast cut into slices. You put the slices, you put the seasoning, 1 tablespoon of seasoning in the oil after the oil is hot. Then you put the strips down on top of it, giving the seasoning just a minute to kind of cook up for a second. Throw the stuff on there, sprinkle some more seasoning on top of the chicken. And you let that cook without fiddling with it until the chicken's cooked all the way through. In this case, we added mushrooms and onions. And let your onions cook down until they're about 3/4 done. Then you add your mushrooms and let those cook a little bit longer. And you've got some really tasty chicken, some really tasty rice you can throw together. Let me show you how that looks here in just a second. Okay, so I've scooped it out the way it needs to be. You've got dinner for me and Mom tonight. You've got 2 lunches for Mom, or 1 for Mom, 1 for me, however it works out. And based on, market costs and everything, we had about, I want to say it was about 75 cents for the onion. It was about $1.50 for mushrooms, so now we're up to $2.25. We've got about 25 cents in rice, so that's $2.50. In the seasoning, I've got about that'll be included in there. And the chicken, that was one piece of a breast at I think we paid $2.50 a pound for, or no, that was the frozen stuff. But if it was a fresh one, it'd be about $2.50 a pound. That was less than 1/4 pound. So let's just round up to $1. So $3.50, and I've got three solid meals. Now we will be adding a salad to the side to help round it out for veggies and stuff. But there it is. So if you figure $3.50, you divide it by 4. You're looking at about 75 cents a plate. My math is probably wrong there, but you're smarter than me. You can figure all that out. So 75 cents a plate for a meal for that. And
it's homemade. It's very tasty. It tastes like some fancy thing you would have got out of a box, but we didn't. So there you go. Hopefully, next thing you'll see would be me and Mom sitting down having dinner with some salad and some chicken and rice.
Dinner. Yummy. Is this your own blend for the rice?
It's one of the pre-made ones.
Oh, okay.
Because I had it before. They get enough in the rice?
I think so. You probably use a little bit more.
Yeah. Which is the other point. You don't necessarily use the same amount for every type of seasoning. So even though I said 1 tablespoon for this rice, you may actually need to put 1.5 tablespoons in to make the seasoning the way you like it. Hopefully it'll be useful for you. Bye. That camera fell over.
Call your mom.